I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today we're talking to Christine Weinrich, the Executive Director of the Memphis Library Foundation. So stay with us for a conversation with Christine. And a reminder, this podcast is brought to you by Treasevant Manor. Christine, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric.
And we are up in our the cozy confines of the 10th floor of Crosstown in the atrium. People may hear some sound as we remain flooded out of our office downtown, but it's fun to do it this way, except for Natalie Van Gundy, our producer. But for everyone else, it's really fun. But for those who don't know, you are not Executive Director of the library. It's the Library Foundation. What is the Library Foundation?
Sure. The Library Foundation is a separate 501c3 nonprofit organization that was set up originally to raise money to help build the Central Library. So the mid-90s, a group of philanthropists recognized the need for a really world-class Central Library in Memphis. They got together, formed the foundation to raise that money. After the money was raised and the building opened in 2001, there was some reflection about the foundation's role. They had some money to put into an endowment to start to support the library in that way. And since then, we have been managing an endowment giving grants to the library. And then we're also kind of the fundraising department for the library from private sources like foundations, corporations, individuals.
I didn't realize that. I remember I moved to Memphis in 95-ish. And there was the beginning of talk around then of like, we're going to move from the old small building that was at the corner of what was that McLean and Peabody. And that's when the foundation started.
Yes,
I didn't
yes.
know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before that, the Friends of the Library have existed for a very long time. The foundation did not exist until then.
Yeah. So what I guess in round numbers, what percentage of how much do you raise every year for the library? Just out of curiosity.
Sure. So obviously the city of Memphis budget provides the vast majority of the funding for the libraries. Thank goodness, because it's, $20 to $25 million a year, and we don't have that capacity for sure.
Right.
Our total budget, including our own operations, is about $1 million a year.
Okay.
So we're providing about $750 to $750 a year in private funding to support library programs, collection enhancements, the new facilities we see coming online, really making our libraries award-winning nationally, able to meet community needs strategically in a way that wouldn't be able to happen with only public dollars.
Right. And that's significant. How do you divide, how do you approach the primary budget, the city operating budget is going to fund this, and we're going to fund that? Is it kind of what didn't get into the city budget kind of goes into the catch-all net, or is it? To
simplify it, I suppose so, but what we really think in terms of is the city budget supporting library operations. Right. So all of those employees, there are about 300 people working in our library system. Those are city employees. They are appointed and they are, on the city payroll. The buildings, the light bill, the maintenance, the janitorial and facilities folks and all, security, all of that is paid by the city of Memphis. And then a certain amount of the collection is also provided by city and state funding. It's the kind of the enhancements that make the library great. Almost all, really, of the programming you see at the library is privately funded.
For example, programming. We've had Keena McCloy, the head of the library.
She's the director of library
on this show. I think she's been on Behind the Headlines and so on. She's been a friend of mine since I moved to Memphis. But for those who don't know, the types of programs you're talking about include what?
Right. Well, right now, we've got 5 Fridays of Jazz going on, and that's one of our kind of hallmark programs that is funded as a partnership between the Overton Park Shell and the Memphis Library Foundation. So every spring, we have 5 Fridays in the Central Library atrium where we have just fantastic jazz concerts, free to the community. You come on in from 6:30 to 8:30 each Friday. I think the last Friday this year is the 29th, and that one's going to have Shell on Wheels in the parking lot. This will be the first time because the Shell has their new mobile.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's an example, bringing arts and culture through the library. The thing about libraries is everything is accessible to everyone.
Right.
It's all free to you, but it's not free to do.
Yeah.
And so you've got, it doesn't matter what your family's net worth is or whether you're unhoused. You can come and enjoy something or get a resource that you need at the library. And that's what we want to make sure is available to everybody, no matter who they are.
It's always remarkable. And Natalie, I've talked about it every time Keenan's been on, that all the things the library does that are not about books or computers or research. Right. I mean, the music is an example.
Yes.
Other examples that you all are funding.
Sure.
And there's so many youth programs.
Yes.
Is that a lot of that come through the foundation?
Yes. So one of our kind of feather in our cap projects is Cloud 901, which a lot of people heard about when it was being built in right around 2015 is when it opened. Cloud 901 is a teen kind of space in the Central Library. It's 2 floors. It's huge. It's got technology, art resources. We run a high school level robotics team that travels and competes out of that space because a lot of high schools can't afford to run a robotics program. So we fund that. We fundraise to build the space, and now we are the ones who sustain those programs. So they have VR headsets, they have a maker space, they have a recording studio, a film and video studio, photography, digital arts, you name it. Kids can get engaged there and get inspired and see a path for themselves that they might not be able to see in their own school, just because those are really expensive programs for schools to have. Yeah,
my son did robotics, and it was just amazing.
Mine did too.
He was at a place where they did have a program, and I could tell you many very funny stories about the robotics program. But,
we can commiserate on that.
Yeah, we'll commiserate on that. We won't bore everyone. Again, we're with Christine Weinrich, the executive director of the Memphis Library Foundation. I pulled just from your website, there are 18 library branches, 48,000 people served, 169,000 people who attend various programs, and 1 million books and materials checked out. It's a lot.
It is.
And we talked about the Central Library, but there are 17 other libraries around the city and county. They're all.
We do have a couple in the county, which is we basically have the city. I shouldn't say we. The city has contracts with a couple of to run a couple of libraries that are not in the city limits, but we consider them family. We do the same for them as we do anyone else.
Cosset Library was a big renovation right downtown, reopened in the last year. I have zero sense of time, but I think it's in the last year.
It was April, the end of April last year. Yes.
Good Lord.
So coming up on the year.
What's that like?
Oh my gosh! If anybody who hasn't been to Cosset needs to get down there. Talk about not your parents' library. There are books. It's a library. There are books, but it's not even the first thing you notice. Cosset was reimagined in a way that is really unique in the library ecosystem, becoming less unique across the country, where they're really kind of trying to drive workforce development, inspiration, innovation in those walls. So we have a cafe there. So you can get lunch, you can get coffee, you can get whatever it is you want to get, so you don't have to leave the library, first of all. And then we have a podcasting studio there. We've had, I know, over 50 podcasts produced in that studio, and we have an innovator in residence, Ina Esco, who actually mentors and does programming for us and bases her own podcast, the Verbally Effective podcast, out of that space. Mm-hmm. We have a photo video lab there, so Ariel Cobbert, who is on staff at the Cosset, but is also a professional and award-winning photographer. She's got work in the Brooks, is there mentoring, doing programs, teaching people how to use the equipment, and really ensuring that, again, they can see themselves. If that's what inspires them, we want them to have those tools. Now we're working on a program at Cosset where kids would be able to check out a band instrument and try it and be able to. Oh,
that's cool.
Right? It costs so much money.
Right.
And, you think you want to play the clarinet when you're in the 6th grade, but do you?
Does any 6th grader really? But the 6th grader's parent thinks they should play the clarinet.
Right. But the point is, it's such an investment to even try it.
Yeah.
And this
that's great.
Yeah. And with partnerships in the community that we're working on, having the instruments available, and then have kind of beginning classes available at Cosset, so you can see if it's really something you want to do or not. Just, everything that you can imagine around entrepreneurship, we want to make that available, and we're really kind of trying to create an innovative staffing model for Cosset. It's not all. There are librarians on staff, but a lot of the staff members don't have history in libraries. In fact, the senior manager doesn't have a history in libraries. So really looking at the community through the community's eyes and meeting those needs in a different way is really important. And the books are there to support. We actually did this with Cloud 901 as well. If you go in Cloud 901, there are some bookcases. If you're in the digital art space and you're doing digital art and one of the mentors there is helping you learn to do digital art and you want to learn more, that mentor might say, here's a book, take a deeper dive, check that book out. So it's a supporting aspect of the learning. Libraries are all about information, access to reliable information. And that's, I think, a conversation you could do a whole podcast on.
Right.
But libraries are there, and library staff are there to be reliable sources of information and inspiration.
Right. And I will say about COSET, I ran into Jared J.B. Boyd, who's the program manager. I think that's his official title. But one of the forces behind WYX Radio. And I asked him, hey, what have you been doing lately? And he was like, I've just spent a lot of time at the COSET library. And so if Jared says it's cool, it's got to be really cool.
Well, we are hoping to engage him as a new innovator in residence. We're looking for funding if anybody wants to support. Those are the kinds of things we support is enabling folks like Jared, who are passionate and inspirational and well-respected in their craft, to be able to share that with the community.
Right. I would say one more thing about Jared, JB, that one time I ran into him and he said, Eric, that's a cool jacket. And I've never forgotten. And I now think of that jacket as like the coolest thing. God, it was blessed by Jared.
It's the coolest thing you ever owned.
I'm a 50-something-year-old man, but I've got a cool jacket. We'll take a minute to do a little housekeeping. Remind everyone that this is The Sidebar. I'm Eric Barnes, our very professional host of many years now. The Sidebar airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. It's focused on the community, arts, culture, and everything in between. It's also not just a radio show. It's one of many weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Memphis Grizzlies podcast, the Memphis Tigers podcast, our food podcast, Sound Bites with Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield, which also airs here on WYXR every Thursday at 11, right before The Sidebar. All of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get The Sidebar on WYXR or at WYXR.org or the WYXR app. You can also get sound bites there. You can get all the talk shows and music shows from WYXR at either the website or the app. It's a great way to keep up with what's going on at YXR. Also, consider becoming a supporter of WYXR. It's nonprofit, listener-supported radio. You can become a member. You can do a one-off donation. All that you can do at WYXR.org or on the app. And if you're not a subscriber to the Daily Memphian, please do become one. We are also a nonprofit, the largest newsroom in the area, and very much appreciative of and supported by our many subscribers. We have coming up soon on The Sidebar, Lauren Kennedy, who she had to reschedule, and then I had to reschedule her. It's becoming kind of a joke. It's like the drummer in Spinal Tap, but hopefully no one dies. And we've also got Josh Burgess, who runs Lucy J's Bakery here in Crosstown, and who's just a very funny guy. And we're going to talk about bread and baking and the mission, the very cool mission that he has at Lucy J's. And the woman who heads up Shelby County Arts and Culture, she's the Shelby County Arts and Culture liaison. That is coming up soon as well. Last week we had Holly Whitfield from the Daily Memphian on, talking about her new book of things to do in Memphis. She, again, as I mentioned, is also one of the co-hosts of our Sound Bites podcasts. And recently we had Birdcap, who local artist who's actually now really an international artist. He's got an exhibit. You've seen his stuff. When you see it, you'll go, I've seen his stuff around. A lot of cool murals and outdoor sort of street art. He's got an exhibit here in Crosstown through, I think, middle of April, so you should come see it. We also had Matisse Moore, who runs the Boys and Girls Club of Memphis on recently. It was really great. Coming up soon, I mentioned, or maybe I didn't, who knows? I did mention Behind the Headlines and WKNO. We do with the good folks over there. We've got Shondell Ryan, the relatively new head of the Downtown Memphis Commission. She's coming up soon. And we recently had new members of City Council, Jerry Green and Pearl Walker, on Behind the Headlines, as well as a number of state legislators and a big two-part interview with Mayor Paul Young. But we are here today with Christine Weinreich, of the Memphis Library Foundation, executive director. The other parts of what you do in terms of supporting other libraries, that's what I wanted to do, because people think of the big central library. a lot of attention, deservedly, on the new library downtown. There's a big renovation up in Fraser, of the Fraser Library, and all around a whole lot that's going on with the park and all kinds of things. Maybe talk about the Fraser Library.
Sure. The Fraser Library actually is not a renovation; it's a whole rebuild.
My bad.
So it'll
Yes.
be three times as big, 20,000 square feet for that community, right on James Road there. Really a great opportunity to give that rich community all of the resources and the space that they need. It's been such a small library. If you've been to the Fraser branch that's been there for a while, it's tiny. The team at the Fraser branch could do so much more with that extra space. And it also is going to be the city's first LEED Silver certified building. So that's exciting as well.
LEED Silver certified, it gets into emissions and energy efficiency.
The way that it's built and the way that it's operated meets certain criteria that are environmentally friendly. So that's exciting as well. As somebody who's not originally from Memphis, is from has lived in other cities, I'm glad to see Memphis shifting in that direction. It's really important, and I love that it's a library that's doing it.
Yeah.
That branch, hopefully, we expect that it'll be opened later this year, probably in the fall. We had some, again, because it's LEED certified, it's more complicated to build.
Right.
And then the pandemic, the congestion of the supply chain, we've all heard about it, kind of created some delays and overruns. But if you go over there right now, man, it's rocking and rolling, and it should be open this year.
That's great.
And then we also have the brand new branch, new community to get a library, which is Orange Mound. The old Melrose High School that development is being turned into, the first floor will be a library and genealogy center, which is really going to be a great asset to that community and to Memphis as a whole as well.
Yeah. You mentioned the pandemic. I'm curious how things, you joined the Library Foundation, we were talking before, 6 months or so before the beginning of, which we're almost, right around the anniversary, sadly, of at least the United States really shutting down and Memphis shutting down. Everything statement of the obvious, was impacted by COVID. Libraries were impacted in some difficult ways. For a while, it was a place that people couldn't go to, that they would go to.
Yes.
All that sort of sense of community that people can get and connection and just getting out. How have things changed for the better? How have things changed for the worse as a result of COVID?
Yeah, it was terrifying when COVID hit. It was terrifying for everybody. Right. It was terrifying in a personal way for me because I didn't even know my job yet, frankly, and how to support library staff in this shift that was unprecedented. That's one of the buzzwords of the pandemic, right? Unprecedented. But what's beautiful about my job is all I've got to do is support what the staff knows the community needs. So they shifted everything online. The libraries were only closed for 3 weeks, but they started immediately producing virtual content. They also came to us, and we were able to provide Wi-Fi hotspots, cell phones, things like that for library staffers, because they didn't have the bandwidth at their house to be able to necessarily do their jobs. We came in with a Zoom platform and things like that, like the virtual capacity to do those programs. In the meantime, library staff were being reassigned to contact tracing with the health department. They were delivering food through MIFA. They did not stop working even when programming stopped and the buildings were shut down and books couldn't be checked out in the same way. Then they created those systems to be able to, reserve your book online and could just go pick it up in a drive-through fashion so that you didn't have to go in. There were all of these different accommodations. The library staff, my philosophy has become, my history is not in libraries, but library staff, librarians are superheroes. They are not doing it for money or power. They almost all have some sort of higher education. They have invested in knowledge, in knowing things and being able to share that with the community. I just think, not to go political at all, but because it's not political, it's apolitical. We just need to fire all of Congress and replace them with library staff.
Yeah.
And then, and Keenan can be president. I'm good with that because she'll sign whatever bill they give to her. And, they're problem solvers. They are problem solvers. They're critical thinkers. And all I have to do is be able to support it.
Yeah.
And my board was on board with that. We were flexible. We were dynamic. We were able to fill gaps that we never knew would exist.
Right.
And now, to your question about how things have changed, we have so many more virtual resources now. So lots of people who aren't able to get out to the library regularly can still, just our ebook collection multiplied.
Oh, yeah.
So just that part of it. Online programming is still a thing. We still do virtual programming. Yeah. During the pandemic, we were really acutely aware of older Memphians who really couldn't get out and maybe lived in senior apartments and assisted living facilities, but they had been going out before that. We didn't want them to be isolated. We wanted to do what we could. So we actually got a grant to place iPads in senior living facilities, train the staff and load all of our apps onto the iPads. And then we had programs to teach older folks how to use FaceTime.
Yeah.
To see their grandkids.
Oh, no, that's a huge thing.
So
and all that continues.
All of that continues. Yeah. Yes, we still have
iPads. Because there's still a need for it.
Yes. And there was a need for it before the pandemic, really.
Right.
Isolation among older people is a real thing, no matter what. But it tuned us into it in a way that I think was really dramatic. And the other thing is that the way that the library has shifted with technology in general, we were already shifting in the direction of cutting edge technology, but it's taken a whole new track because of the impact of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I remember talking to Sally Jones Hines about MIFA, and they realized, part of the, Meals on Wheels is first and foremost delivering meals, but it's also connection. And she talked about how they started doing phone calls, and that was a thing that I think they've continued because they realized it was so valuable just to make a phone call, check in, and connection for isolated seniors, and that had always been there and remains there even after COVID. And you look at, like, every once in a while I'm invited to speak at church kind of gathering sort of things, and they live stream all that now for people who can't make it. And so much stuff. We're talking about Fraser, the Fraser Community Center, the Fraser, what's it called? The Fraser Exchange Club, which has really the best lineup of speakers. Like, Natalie and I sometimes are like, God, how'd they get that person on there? We've been trying to get that person for a year. They not only a beautiful center, but they live stream all that and they record it. And I think all that stuff is kind of COVID was horrible.
Yes.
But there were some of these benefits that came out of it, that of more connection and awareness of these kinds of how do you find people, how do you connect with people.
And I think we're just more aware of the impact of not being around other people.
Yeah.
And so wanting to go into those spaces. I mean, we had over 100 people at the Cossett Library for a play last Friday. Last night, there were 250 people at Cossett. Friday night, there were a couple hundred people at Central for 5 Fridays of Jazz. I mean, the number of people coming to programs has really ballooned.
Because you think coming off of people going the isolation and wanting to seek being out.
And the partnerships we have create those connections in a really meaningful way. For example, we partner with Creative Aging. Creative Aging does a lot of their work in libraries and works with the library staff to identify the programs that are needed. Yep. And then those folks come together for an art class. Those older adults come together for an art class, and then they're exchanging phone numbers and they're getting together for coffee. Yeah. And that happens across the system every day. Yeah. With just a couple minutes left, you came to this from Southern College of Optometry. That's correct, yeah.
You did philanthropy there?
I was in the advancement department. I was the director of grants and community engagement.
Okay. Yeah, they're a great organization.
They are fantastic. And the only time I've ever regretted leaving any job in my entire life was when the pandemic hit and I had left SCO.
Yeah.
I don't regret it anymore, to be clear. I love my job.
They do amazing stuff.
They do.
I don't know that everybody understands like the kind of reach they have.
The community impact that they have. Yeah, you should have one of them on for sure.
Yeah. And before that, you were a lawyer? You came at this as a lawyer.
Yes, I practiced law in the Detroit area, actually, for about 14 years. And then my husband, as is the case with so many Memphians, my husband got a job with FedEx and we moved to Memphis. But I have an odd Memphis story because I was actually born here.
Oh, wow.
So my parents grew up in Memphis. When my dad was in the service, when he got out of the Navy, he got a job in Flint, Michigan. I was 3. And we moved to Michigan. I was raised, went to college, went to law school, all in Michigan. When I was 40, my husband got a job in Memphis, and here we are.
Yeah. So he was at the Millington base.
Yes.
This is a thing that people, I think,
I was born at the Millington base.
Were you really? Okay, so people don't realize there's this massive Navy base.
Yes.
And when you tell people that, they're kind of like, I think fewer people realize it.
Yeah.
Because
it's
like,
shrunk.
It's shrunk. I mean, it was massive. But then people go, this is partly when I would tell people from outside Memphis, they go, wait, Navy base in Memphis.
Right. Naval Air Base. To
Naval
be clear,
Air Base. I know, but you say Navy base and people are going,
right.
Is the river that big?
Right.
I mean, I didn't know. So,
my
that's
parents
really
grew up here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my family is here, and I have family here, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely. What was Detroit like? So you're a lawyer in Detroit, doing what kind of law?
Mostly, I mean, I hung out a shingle, so I did mostly family law because that's what most real people need. I did some bankruptcy, especially in the recession.
Yeah.
I did traffic tickets, and then I referred the big stuff out, basically.
Yeah.
So I was a general practitioner.
So you when did you leave, give or take, Detroit? I'm fascinated by Detroit, by the way. So
it's fantastic. Have you visited
I
quite
have,
a bit?
and I now have some business sort of connected. There's an association in that I'll go there for meetings, and it is so cool to see how it has come back.
Yes.
It is not there yet, but all the trajectory of it in this really beautiful downtown.
It is.
That is just, it's like a mini Chicago.
Yeah.
And it's not small, but
no.
compared to Chicago, it's smaller.
Yes.
Beautiful architecture, really cool streetscapes.
Yep.
It's a really fascinating, interesting place.
It is. It's a fantastic place. And I left the Detroit area in 2011, but my parents and my sister and brother-in-law are still there.
Yeah.
And my youngest son is at the University of Michigan.
Oh,
so
okay.
we're up there several times a year.
Yeah. I love going there. And some people are like, wait, Detroit. I go, no, you have to go see.
You have to go. It's very much like Memphis.
It is.
Memphis is a lot smaller than Detroit, but that whole grit and grind and this perception of its dark underbelly, it's not true.
Yeah, right.
It's not true.
Right.
There's so much good.
We're running out of time. I always try to ask people the first concert you ever attended.
Oh my gosh. This is going to be so funny. The first concert I ever attended was Lena Horne.
Oh, wow, that's pretty good.
I was 11.
That's pretty good.
Because my mom and dad had tickets and my mother got sick. So my dad took me to see Lena Horne. Wow. And I remember it so vividly. I couldn't believe that sound could come out of a human.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
First concert you bought your own ticket to, you know?
Okay. I mean? The first concert I bought my own ticket to would have been around the mid-'80s, and it would have been the Beach Boys. Incarnation with John Stamos on the drums.
I forgot about that. I blocked out the John Stamos era.
He's pretty good.
Wow. That's very funny.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So, Christine Weinrich from the Memphis Library Foundation, thanks very much for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. People can learn more about the library. Obviously, go online. They can learn more about the foundation and getting involved. You all have it. Just search Memphis Library Foundation.
We've got memphislibraryfoundation.org and all the social media. You can check us out.
Okay. A reminder, the Sidebar airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. If you missed any of the show today, you can get the full podcast of the interview with the Daily Memphian, WYXR, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.